All right, everybody, you know a UFC pay-per-view is right around the corner because that means the great Jon Anik joins us to discuss the big storylines from the play-by-play perspective. Yes, it's on to Manchester, England for UFC 304. We have two title fights, including Leon Edwards defending his welterweight title in the main event against Belal Muhammad in a rematch. Jon Anik, my man, first time chatting since the Boston Celtics won some rings. How's life in sunny Florida? Do you still carry that championship glow, my man?
Yeah, I was doing some media earlier today, and a media member who shall not be named asked me about a Boston Bruins trade this summer. It's like, bro, we are celebrating the 2024 NBA champion Boston Celtics, and we're going to continue that celebration. Thankfully, the players understand the extent to which this was a monkey off the back, and they're celebrating in turn, right? They're extending this celebration as well. So I got to meet Joe Mazzulla, bro, at UFC 303. He was there as a guest of Dana White, and if you really want to know, he's like my favorite human being now, maybe next to my son, because he asked me for my phone number, and now we're kind of acquaintances. So my life has forever changed. He's an elite human being, man of God, tremendous head coach and basketball mind, New England kid who was happy to bring it home for Boston. And I guess that's probably enough on that before I lose everybody.
Love that. And I love the fact that for a change, especially for Boston sports fans, we didn't have to sweat a whole lot. It was refreshing. I know the rest of the sports watching world may have been a little bored, but I was compelled the whole way through, John. This is great.
Yeah, it was a different sweat than past seasons for sure. I felt like this year's sweat was the whole season because they were favored in October, November, December, and every step of the way, and they still got it done. But to your point, 16-3 in the playoffs. And I guess it felt sort of more trying than that at times. But yeah, best team in the NBA all season long. And, to all the New Yorkers out there, right? It's been like 5,000 days since there's been a championship. And to all the myriad fan bases out there that want to hate on Boston, I've softened as a sports fan at this stage in my life. I'm very happy when other fan bases break through. I can't wait to see Aaron Rodgers realize success for the New York Jets, whom I grew up hating. But Boston's on top of the sports world yet again. And, it's unfortunate for all the haters out there. I don't know what to tell you.
Speaking of being on top of the sports world, did I see correctly 500 episodes of Anik and Florian? Right?
Yeah, Dominic Cruz is like, what the fuck are you talking about for 500 episodes? He's probably right. And we don't do a lot of fighter interviews on the show for myriad reasons, in some part because I have access to the entire roster. Many of the elite athletes are my dear friends, and I don't want to leverage those relationships for ratings on my show. So also, it's in part what content I want to throw out there, and it's a platform, I think, for Kenny, certainly, to prove and show his MMA analytics to the world, and for Ray Longo and everybody else. But for the 500th episode, wanted to blow it out for the listenership and the viewership. So, George St. Pierre and Kamaru Usman and Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje and Chris Weidman and, called on some favors from some of my dear friends. And, it was fun to listen to what they had to say. But, we're onward. It'll always be free. It'll never be behind a paywall. And I think almost at times it's more therapeutic for me to have a podcast than the other way around. But I can't see any better way to long-term give back to the fans than to provide free content, So that's what we're going to continue to do to however many people that want to ingest it. So thank you, buddy.
Well, congrats on that. Congrats to the Boston Celtics. We go from the parquet and personal accomplishments to the hallowed octagon, where the UFC heads back to the UK for UFC 304. And look, sometimes we look at these cards, John, especially these main cards on paper, and you can find a lot of positives and things. And yes, you could find some things to poke holes at, nitpick a little bit. But man, when it comes to this main card, we got the two title fights. We got Paddy Pimblett versus King Don't Call Me Bobby Green. We have Arnold Allen versus Giga Chikadze, Manel Kape versus Muhammad Mokaev. Good Lord, man, this is pretty freaking fantastic.
Oh, it's amazing. I haven't looked forward to a pay-per-view like this since probably UFC 303 last month. Right. No, I mean, I love all of these shows, right? But you're right. There's undeniable depth for me. As we've talked about, I haven't had a lot of chances to call fights in the UK. I don't care what my call time is. I will show up, whether it's Australia at 3 a.m. or this in the middle of the night. You got to be ready to perform as a fighter or a play-by-play guy or anybody who works for the UFC. Excited doesn't even begin to describe it. I can't wait to see, what these athletes, these Chicago athletes in particular, Belal Muhammad and Curtis Blaydes, can do with these opportunities, because I think they're deserving. And, for Tom Aspinall and Leon Edwards, it's just going to be absolutely electric when they hit that tunnel. For Paddy Pimblett as well, having a hard time getting Bobby out of my mouth, I'll tell you that. So hopefully it'll be King Green come July 27th. But needless to say, I'm very excited here as we sit, 9-10 days out.
So I just want to ask you, because we just did a live show as we record this right now, and I said Bobby Green on the live show, and then I had to remember it was King Green, and we were trying to figure out, along with the live viewing audience, is he King Green, or does Bobby become the nickname? Because that would be pretty funny if he just was still King Bobby Green, but just kind of change things around a little bit.
Yeah, dude, I've been doing media all day. I've said Bobby 5 times as the count now. None yet with you. No, it's King Green. There's no double King going on here. I would also advise LeBron James to potentially change his name to King James. But yeah, it's King Green here 2-4. And honestly, if you saw him at UFC 300, certainly looked like a king, a very fast primal king. So excited to see what he can do here coming up in a few days.
Main event, welterweight strap on the line. Leon Edwards defending against Belal Muhammad. Belal finally gets his due, finally gets his day in court, in enemy territory. But as good as this main card is, and as good as this fight is, just sort of looking into the MMA bubble, it seems like this one is flying under the radar a little bit. Do you notice that as well, especially with it being a main event title fight?
Not for me, but perhaps I'm too insulated. My twin brother is like best friends with Belal Muhammad. This feels bigger than any Boston Celtics championship for him. And we have the same DNA, and I'm at his house right now. So this feels enormous for any number of different reasons. Tom Aspinall and his presence in the MMA world and his status right now. I have put Leon on a pedestal. I know Belal maybe doesn't think that, he is this otherworldly welterweight champion that I do, but I think it's going to take Belal's best certainly to dethrone this guy. There are a lot of reasons that make this pay-per-view special for me on an individual level. So I don't feel any of that. I'm not the internal metric guy. I'm hoping that it does really well. But no, man, I am just so excited to get there. I really am. And, I think what leads the dance as far as my enthusiasm, though, is just that I haven't had a chance to hear and feel these fans in England very much over the last 10 years.
I know you pay attention to the confidence levels heading into these fights. You're a fan of that. And both these men, they aren't lacking it at all, man. Like, being champion, Leon obviously has that additional swagger that comes with carrying that belt. But Belal Muhammad's confidence is through the roof. He's doing interviews saying that as he's beating the hell out of Leon Edwards, he's going to be yelling at Leon's coach, give him advice, tell him how to get out of this, as he's sort of demoralizing the welterweight champion. And Belal, like you said, obviously hosts a show with your twin brother. Do you have any insight to this confidence from either your brother or even Belal himself? Because he's saying a lot of stuff that is out there that people can see. And Belal's a confident guy, but you don't necessarily hear this sort of confidence from him.
Well, the confidence stems from having not lost a fight in a half a decade. And if you go back and watch that fight against Jeff Neal, Belal's incredible toughness was on display then, as it was when he got head kicked by Leon Edwards. I think it comes from not losing a fight. It comes from the work that he has put in. I think he understands how physically strong he is. I think he understands his ability to impose his will, to be opportunistic with his striking chances, to potentially employ elbows and take advantage of ground and pound opportunities. I think it really comes from the mixed martial arts skill set. I don't think it's, just trying to build a fight or anything like that. I really just think it comes from the work. A lot of people today, as I'm doing media, are asking me about his layoff. And I don't really think that he's done a lot of simulations necessarily in terms of like weight cuts and things like that. But he's weighed in as a backup. I don't think he worries a skosh about ring rust or anything like that. His mentality is very strong. He's always been a particularly forged individual, and it's just been crazy, to have somewhat of a front row seat to his ascent, as a human being and a man who has supported his people to such an extent. I am so proud of him and emotional for him. I think it's going to be emotional for him dealing with that particular variable and, trying to come through for Gaza and all of his Palestinian Americans. I just think it's a lot on his plate, but if I had to send a man into battle for that type of initiative, I'd probably send him.
Yeah, I mean, the shot is clearly long overdue for him, so I'm sure there's a little bit of a chip on his shoulder in that regard. And he's been traveling in similar shoes that Leon Edwards did to get his opportunity, and we saw how that worked out. He delivered one of the greatest moments in the history of the sport, but one of the big talking points heading into that title shot against Kamaru Usman was because of the promotional hesitation, as it were, that would likely be his do or die moment. If he's going to ever win the belt, he's got to do it now. He may not get another chance. And for Belal Muhammad, I can't help but sort of feel the same just based on the path that he has taken. So do you feel like this is a do or die sort of situation for Belal Muhammad, essentially with the championship aspirations in this division?
Well, I think a lot of factors could make it hard for him to get back there. Certainly if the fight is an absolute war and it's close and he wins it, he might have to fight Leon twice. You got Shavkat Rakhmonov and Ian Machado Gary waiting in the wings, undefeated fighters, not to mention Jack Della Maddalena on the men, the winner of Sean Brady and Gilbert Burns, Kamaru Usman as the number one contender wanting to compete at 70. So there's a lot of things maybe at play that could work against Belal were he to lose to Leon Edwards here, but the pay-per-view open writes itself for me, right? In terms of Leon Edwards having to bide his time and wait for this opportunity. And maybe there was some promotional hesitation to your point and he gets the opportunity. And that's why it's the greatest knockout in UFC history in some part because of that backdrop in a last ditch moment. But yeah, I mean, I think it could be one and done for Belal in terms of those chances. He's in his mid-30s at this point in time. And even if he wanted to compete for 6 or 7 or 8 more years, there's a lot of young, hungry welterweight contenders that move a lot of different needles that are going to be heard from. But, I think Belal is trying to put himself in position to make July 27th his opportunity to, stick it to the rest of the world and end that conversation right there and then.
We say this all the time because the champ stuff drives me crazy. I think it's more, it's a more impressive feat to just continuously defend that belt over and over again. And I know Islam Makhachev has talked about this. It is one thing to win the belt, but it is so tough to keep it because all these guys that are on the come up, at least at some point in almost every single practice, they're watching tape on you. They're learning what it's like to be in that cage with you. These guys are preparing for 2, 3, sometimes even longer years to fight you. So it's so difficult to hold on to that belt. So considering the run that Leon has put on in this unbeaten streak and has a couple of defenses under his belt, now he gets the opportunity to fight at home once again in another title defense. What does a win over Belal Muhammad do for him, for his legacy, his title reign, etc., considering how difficult it is to just continuously run off these reigns?
I'm so happy to get this question and answer a question about Leon Edwards' legacy and not necessarily about a super fight, right? Because all of these guys monetarily, if that's a big deal and the difference, deserve that super fight. But Kamaru Usman is a legend with crazy ice on his left wrist and a great checking account balance, I'm sure, because he didn't move up. Right? Because he sustained and continued to defend in the welterweight division and chase records, right? So oftentimes I think dynasties and long reigning champions are really how legacies are made. And I think Leon Edwards potentially is on the cusp of that. And the type of scalps that he could leave in his wake, like the ever deserving Belal Muhammad and potentially the undefeated Shavkat Rakhmonov that is all the rage with men and women alike, right? Or Ian Machado Gary, who is brash, but probably as good as every word that comes out of his mouth. Jack Della Maddalena with an entire country that absolutely eats this sport 3 meals a day behind him. It's a tremendous time to be Leon Edwards. And if you believe in Leon the way I do, skill for skill, there's no reason why he wouldn't be favored to beat all of these amazing fighters. So excited to see what he can do. It stands to reason that we're getting the best versions of both of these guys. And I can't fucking wait, Michael. Let's go.
Well, before that fight could happen, and it's a good one, we got Tommy Aspinall at home defending against Curtis Blaydes. And again, like Belal Muhammad, Curtis Blaydes finally gets his opportunity to fight for a UFC title, interim or not. There's a bit of a story here because these two guys fought before and it never really got going due to the unfortunate injury that Tom Aspinall suffered. And we know how this is going to play. Aspinall is going to get the star treatment in the home country. But Blaydes likes to play spoiler. He's done it many times. And For Aspinall, people are just very excited for his future. Maybe a future fight with Jon Jones if he continues to get wins and to get over. Can you make the case that the fighters in the co-main event have more to lose than the main event?
Great question. Hard to answer, but there's no denying how much is at stake, right? And who knows who could be next for the winner of Tom Aspinall and Curtis Blaydes. The betting man in me would suggest that it might be Alexander Volkov or Ciryl Gane, and the winner of Jon Jones and Stipe would ride off into the sunset. But if a 42-year-old Stipe Miocic upsets Jon Jones in November, Johnny Bones ain't going out like that. So that could certainly upset the apple cart. But yes, there is a ton on the line. As far as I'm concerned, this is really an undisputed championship title defense for Tommy Aspinall. And I love that we all take the liberty to call him fucking Tommy whenever we goddamn well please. Maybe I'll ask him politely in our fighter meeting if that's actually okay. The obnoxious New Englanders calling him Tommy every chance we get. But it's a huge fight. I'm richly happy for Curtis because he has put in his time and he is on that short list of fighters who has been deserving of this opportunity and hasn't gotten it for whatever reason. Promotional hesitation. I don't know if that's the reason, but for whatever reason, he hasn't been the right guy at the right time. The 2 losses, obviously, to Francis Ngannou didn't help. But we'll see what Blaydes can do with the opportunity. Even though the first fight didn't give us a lot of film, Blaydes was certainly ready to go as far as his hands were concerned. And I think Tom is going to be ready to go in any setting. I think he'll be buoyed by the crowd. I think the loudest ovation of the night, it stands to reason, could very well be when Aspinall hits that tunnel. I think it's going to be absolutely insane. I will absolutely be taking the cans off in that moment. But I think Curtis Blaydes will be ready to go. I think potentially could be a very quick fight. I think it's going to be a boxing match for as long as it lasts. And I've been wrong before. But a ton on the line, bro. An absolute ton on the line for those 2 heavyweights, just given all the mud in the waters right now.
Yeah, I mean, if Stipe wins, who the hell knows what's going to happen? Because I feel like, if Stipe beats Jon, Jon's going to want a rematch, and Stipe, that's just a monster fight for Stipe. So he'd probably stick around for one more. So I don't know necessarily he fights out of these 2 guys. If Jon wins, I don't know if he says the R word. I kind of feel like he's just going to be like, I'm going to take some time off and see if one of these people impress me. And then if that happens, I just don't know if they will strip him of the belt. I think they will try to keep him around. Yeah. So this is just my opinion. Do you feel like what percentage would you give that the winner of this fight will become the actual champion heading into 2025?
I think there's a pretty good chance of that. I really do. I think there's so much undecided right now, but if I were those 2 guys, I would absolutely be of that mindset that I'm going to be eventually promoted to undisputed champion. It just sounds to me like Johnny Bones kind of wants to put a capstone on this thing and ride into the sunset and not have, drug testers and other people showing up at his front door all the time, So we'll see what happens. And as far as Stipe is concerned, I hate to speculate as to what a guy's intentions are, so I really don't know. Is he coming back for the legacy fight, the payday, or could it actually be, over 1.5 fights and we get 2 out of Stipe if he performs well, even if he doesn't win? I really don't know. But Volkov is deserving right now as far as I'm concerned. So the heavyweight division is in a great position. But yeah, man, I'm really excited to see who emerges from a fight that I think will probably be 8 minutes or fewer come next Saturday night.
Talking to, the Eric Nicksics of the world and, other coaches around the sport, once in a while, these fighters will do little tours and they'll go to, Tom Aspinall will go to Vegas and he'll train with Extreme Couture and he'll go to different places. And there's I can count them maybe on 2 hands how many times it is unanimous that a coach just says about a certain fighter, I've never seen anything like this guy. He moves like this. He does these things. And it's Tom Aspinall. Anytime he comes in, he is way more insane than I thought he was watching him on television. He's worth every bit of hype. And then some, when I see them, Eric was telling me he had Kai Kamaka get into the cage and move around with Tom, and they were moving at similar speeds, which is insane when you consider how massive Tom Aspinall is. So as a man who has called Tom Aspinall fights and has seen this man up close competing, what is that like for watching all these heavyweights come and go? And then you have a young whippersnapper like Tom Aspinall who just is so freakishly athletic like that. What has that been like watching from cage side?
Dude, and he's so much bigger in person. It's crazy, man. It's really exciting. And it's why people like Michael Bisping talk about him in these glorified terms, not because they're friends, but because they really believe in this type of athlete and the way his skills have been developed by his father from an early age, tremendous grappling base and the footwork really for a heavyweight, the speed, the power. I often talk about Curtis Blaydes walking into a fighter meeting, putting his fist down on the table, true lunch boxes for fists, right? Like oftentimes I lean into genetics, right? Like Leon Edwards, right? Like those hands look like they could knock a 170-pound athlete out clean, cold, right? Tom Aspinall is a genetic freak, man. I haven't had a chance to call a ton of his fights. And every time he walks into the fighter meeting, it's like, is this guy still growing? You know? So still coming into his own, scary proposition for the rest of the heavyweight division. It's going to really be interesting to see if his submission game is heard from, you know, as he gets going, because he hasn't arrived at his fighting prime and yet looks to be just so good right now. So it's going to be exciting to see how hard those knuckles are come July 27th and see what Curtis Blaydes has to say about all of this. Because I don't think Curtis Blaydes is necessarily coming to wrestle.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of line movement in this fight too. A lot going towards Tom Aspinall. Seen the underdog line just continuously grow for Curtis Blaydes, going from like a plus 200 to like a plus 310 in just like a matter of days. Just been wild to see. But Curtis Blaydes could play spoiler. Really looking forward to that. The fight that I might be most intrigued by King Green versus Paddy Pimblett, just from a fan's perspective. Like, I understand the stakes on both those fights, and they are fascinating to me for sure. But Green versus Pimblett just scratches me right where I itch, because Paddy's getting this step up against a game opponent, another wily veteran coming off of a great performance at UFC 300. Not to mention, which was cherry on top of the old Sunday, John, Paddy revealing that this is the last fight on his current contract, and he has a dance partner who will happily go to the UK and play the villain in Manchester and do it absolutely perfectly. So first off, when you saw, because I'm sure you saw the clip that Paddy's fighting out his deal, what was your reaction to that? Just letting that out there and the fact that he would just risk it all, essentially.
I don't know. I don't know if it's something we should lean all that heavily into. I think the business that Paddy Pimblett is trying to accomplish as a mixed martial arts athlete is going to happen in the UFC. So I'm pretty confident that they can strike a deal, and maybe they would even do something before the fight with King Green on July 27th. You know, I just believe in him, you know, maybe more than some of the MMA masses do. I believe in his appetite for improvement, you know, and I do think as he gets older, I think there will be an even greater commitment and maturity that's only going to unleash an even greater beast. You know, he's got a lot of athletic gifts. He's got a lot of power. He is a very good grappler, and he's a big game player. I think that the Jared Gordon fight and other appearances maybe have him in an underrated capacity right now relative to his skills, because the style points haven't always been there relative to the hype. But I can't wait to see what he does against King Green. And I just can't believe how fast Green, I can't call him the B word, so it's going to be Green or King. He looks so fast against Jim Miller. So fast, right? Take it from my broadcast partners. We were wowed at UFC 300. So I think it's going to be an interesting matchup, and I hope Paddy Pimblett's future long-term is in the UFC.
What does Paddy Pimblett gain outside of making a few extra dollars here? Because as you said, many feel he is a little bit underrated based on the Jared Gordon fight. Tony Ferguson is obviously not the same Tony Ferguson. The brashness of him kind of rubs people the wrong way, but the man is going out and winning fights. So outside of getting a bigger contract, which I think that's what he wants by putting this information out there, what does he gain in the best division in the sport, John?
Well, maybe I'll pose that exact question to him in our fighter meeting this week, because I think it's interesting when you think about, say, Ian Machado Gary and his relative appetite to be a world champion. It's complete obsession 24/7, 365. And there's certainly a monetary component that comes with it, right? But the Shark Tank that is the UFC's lightweight division is going to be a 3-year potentially navigation for Paddy Pimblett right now. So what is his appetite to go through that right now and, you know, fight 3 times a year against Mateusz Gamrot and everybody else? I don't know the answer to that question. I'll have more for you 1 week from today, July 25, when I sit down with the athlete in the fighter meeting. But I do believe mentally, physically, spiritually, he has everything that it takes to be an elite UFC fighter. And I just don't know where he's at. You know, Dominic Cruz talks a lot about clear intentions, and I'm curious exactly what his are. But if he loses sleep over not being, you know, in the UFC's lightweight top 10, and I'm hoping that's the case, then hopefully it's going to be long term in the UFC, and he's going to make a big statement, you know, at UFC 304 against King Green.
Yeah, we talk about the magical run that Jorge Masvidal had in 2019, where he just went from we love this guy to becoming an absolute superstar, and we feel like Bobby Green has been on the cusp of doing something similar. And he gets knocked up by Jalen Turner and comes back and has a tremendous performance. But if he can go out there and beat Paddy Pimblett, yeah, he might get booed out of that building in Manchester, but a lot of the fan base around the world outside of the UK are going to be like, holy crap, this is our guy. Whatever. What does a win do for Bobby Green here at 155? Beating Jim Miller and then going in to enemy territory and beating Paddy Pimblett, he becomes a huge story of this card.
There's no doubt. And obviously, he's a guy, I don't have to tell you, that has stepped up on multiple occasions for the UFC. As such, he was rewarded with a slot at UFC 300. And I just feel so good about everything that King Green has accomplished. I've said it before, right? But, you know, buying houses for all of his children and everything that he has done with his career is truly inspirational. But at the end of the day, he's an elite professional athlete. Like, he's a true professional athlete that, you know, I think probably could have played wide receiver or something, you know? So I don't know how far he can take it. You know, I do think there are some definite stylistic challenges for both of these guys at 155 pounds, but there's a lot of big fights that await, potential main events that await both of these guys. And, you know, far be it for me to question, you know, just how high the ceiling would be at whatever age for King Green, because if you're only as good as your last performance, I was effectively wowed. And, you know, I've been saying as much all week.
We got Giga Chikadze, Arnold Allen. We got Muhammad Mokaev, Manel Cup. Molly McCann is back. She looked incredible in her 115-pound debut inside the octagon. Lots to choose from here, John. What's, you know, I'm going to ask you the low-key banger. What's the one that has caught your eye more than anything that maybe the fan base isn't giving enough credence to right now?
Well, certainly Arnold Allen versus Giga Chikadze is just an awesome fight. And again, Arnold Allen on that Curtis Blaydes list of the very best fighters in the world that haven't fought for the championship for one reason or another. Manel Kape taking on Muhammad Mokaev, absolutely fascinating pick'em fight on paper right now. But for me, Meatball Molly McCann in the UK. I have not called a Molly McCann fight in England, so I'm very excited about that particular endeavor. So that jumps off the prelims for me. Oban Elliott is back for his second UFC appearance, and yeah, this American is very excited to get on this Virgin Atlantic aircraft and head to Manchester here in a few days.
Well, safe travels, my man. Appreciate you as always. Enjoy being back in the UK and enjoy the fight card, my man. There's a lot to be excited about, and go C's.
Took the words out of my mouth, buddy. Thanks for having me as always. And I'm sure we'll talk to you soon before Western Australia or something.